Inviting millennials and Gen Z as donors and volunteers, what do nonprofits need to do to bridge the great divide? Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school, and we are joined today by AJ Steinberg. She is the principal and CEO of Queen Bee Fundraising, has extensive experience in the nonprofit sector, and I had the wonderful opportunity to learn from AJ at the San Diego Fundraising Conference as she provided practical instruction on including millennials and Gen Z. And AJ, thanks so much for being with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Bill. I'm really happy to be here today.
I use that phrase, bridging the great divide, because in your workshop, I remember you used the first third, the first half to say, like, you know, Gen X and boomers are over here and millennials and Gen Z are over here or not even in the picture yet. And we need to take some steps to start crossing those lines of distinction so that all generations are are at the table and in the donor database. Can you help our audience understand your perspective on bringing these generations together for the sake of the nonprofit?
Yeah, that's a really great starting point. First of all, I think that every organization wants to have multi-generational giving. They want to have the broad spectrum. And they've been talking about it for probably, 20 years? You've been around for a while, Billy. We've been talking about this for a long time. But what's happened is there's a fear factor that is just intrinsic in change. And you have an older generation of people on the board wanting to bring in new generations, younger generations. And yet just the whole idea of them handing over the reins has made it just a little bit scary for them because they're worried about a lot of things, like suddenly they're not going to be relevant, their legacy will be erased. So whereas they have the desire to bring in the younger generations, they don't take the steps that are needed. And the steps are basically changing how we think, because generations think differently. Do you agree with that? We don't all think the same. And we've been building boards and building committees and building events the same way since the dinosaurs roamed the earth. So we need to think about what these younger generations are looking for when it comes to their events, their experience, because as you know, the Lilly School does all this great research, is that younger generations are looking for impact and to volunteer and have their fingers in what's happening to something they care about. They don't just want to sit there and rubber stamp things. So we need to change how we actually interact with them, how we communicate with them.
One thing I love about that wonderful answer is, you know, we talk about how do we invite millennials and Gen Z to be at the table, to be our volunteers, to be our donors. But you started with empathy, that what Gen X and boomers are going through in many stages of their life. Oh, my kids have moved out. Now I'm an empty nester. Oh, yeah, my health and my physical condition might not be exactly the same as it was back in the day. Boy, there's all this technology I need to adjust to. Back in the day, it was a certain way. That I heard some empathy in your reply that let's understand where Gen X and the boomers are before we say, hey, you do hold kind of all the power seats as most or all the board members before, you know, we start reaching out and trying to find the best ways to include millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah, empathy on both sides, because the people who are the older generations really don't understand how difficult it is or remember how difficult it is to raise kids, juggle a job, to find your place in a community. And the younger generations have no idea what it's like to get up and realize your time is limited, or that your body is breaking down, or that you've got different issues. So the empathy of walking in the other generation's shoes is going to really help for bringing together different generations. And that's sort of what I was talking about in that presentation that you sat in, is we need to find a way to gracefully integrate younger generations into boards and committees rather than shoving them together and thinking they'll just get along.
One of the ideas I wrote down in your session and put lots of stars around it, circled it many times. I think my pen ran out of ink. I was so excited about this idea. Is when we have a board of directors and we have something new, we create a task force. Oh, we need to buy new vehicles to meet new federal regulations to drive the kids to and from school and to and from the nonprofit. That's an example of my own board service from back in the day, for example. Oh, we're going to have a new special event. Let's create a task force to examine it. You brought up a task force type of an idea to help bring the generations together. Can you describe that for our audience, please?
Yeah, it's basically getting influencers from both generations together to have a moment together to meld. Every generation has influencers. We know that older generations, there's always somebody that everybody gravitates to. When they have an idea, everybody tends to just nod their head in agreement. All generations have that. By taking the influencers from differing generations, putting them on a task force and saying, let's together come up with solutions that the younger generation and the older generations can agree upon. And then let's bring them to the board as a whole or the larger of the committee. That way, you already have the ear of both generations. And that's what's important is we don't want to listen immediately to the younger generation or to the older generation. Yeah, you kind of come in with some skepticism.
Yeah.
So by getting the influencers to come to an agreement and start a relationship, because like sponsorships, like donor stewardship, everything is relationship built. So you need to forge relationships between these influencers. And then once the influencers understand each other with empathy and as humans and people and understand the perspective of where they're coming from, they can take those decisions that they'd like to present to their generational groups. Also, big believer in that next gen task force that we were talking about. Let them have their own task force, their own committee, their own event. I'm event-based. I'm an event producer. That is something I'm big on, is don't shove the younger generations into a gala because it's not a good fit. They can't afford the tickets. They don't want to be there. Don't just say, okay, so we'll choose a new event for you. That is such a beautiful opportunity to bring the younger generations in and give them skin in the game, because they're not disengaged. They just engage differently. So let them show the way.
AJ, that's so well said. And in fact, the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy's most recent research on millennials and Gen Z says they are absolutely generous, absolutely philanthropic. But just like the boomers maybe are still listening to one type of music, the millennials and Gen Z are listening to other types of music. They all like music, just different types. And therefore, we think about different ways to engage with a nonprofit organization. I'd like to go back. Two great ideas there. If we could take one at a time. Getting back to that multi-generational task force, it kind of goes back to kind of representative. You know, we got all four generations. Everybody's at the table. They're representing from their viewpoint, finding their common ground. Can you give us some steps? And maybe you shared this with the nonprofits with which you work. How do I start? Especially if I'm that Gen X and Boomer, and we've been on the board all these years, and I guess my kids are millennials and Gen Z, but that's nepotism. How can I find some other millennials and Gen Z? Can you give us some of the practical steps to get to that point of building that task force, please?
Well, I think that is such a great comment, because everybody, no matter what you're doing, they're always saying, well, what's my first step and where do I look? Well, you can look under your nose, first of all, because there are opportunities for younger people to volunteer. If somebody has been a volunteer and proven an affinity for your organization, that is a time to start the stewardship of bringing them into a more leadership position. Also, too, and here's a great example. You never know where you're going to find these younger generation of people, and do not discount them because of age or that they just don't seem. For smaller organizations, Bill, their boards are desperate for talent in the social media and communications portion of their business, of their organization. And who knows social media better than teenagers? Am I correct? So I happened, and once again, keep your eyes open. You never know where you're going to find talent and potential. I was working with another organization, just kind of talking to them, collaborating with them. And there was a senior in high school who was an Eagle. She was one of the first female Eagle Scouts ever. So she was a go-getter. She is going someplace. I said, would you like to come and sit in one of our board meetings? Well, she said yes, because she's thinking college, right? Well, she came in and joined the board. She was 17 years old. Now, this is not for everybody. This is a very small organization, but she revamped their communications completely, put them on social media, did everything she needed to do. So That's a different kind of a situation, but it could have been a task force. Look at the talent you need to move into that next generation, the younger generations coming down. Look for that talent in other organizations who have interns, in your own volunteer force. Look in colleges and programs where people can volunteer.
Another idea that you mentioned too at the conference was that more often than not, while our boards might be predominantly Gen X and Boomer, our staffs often are not, that we often are more multi-generational at the staff level, with Millennials and Gen Z joining the two older generations still in the workforce. How about we just ask the Millennial and Gen Z staff members, AJ suggested, as they are working for us, like, who do you know who might care about our cause? AJ, I thought that was just a brilliant idea and a suggestion to, again, help introduce younger generations into our nonprofit.
Which also means we need to be looking at our overall staffing, right? Is that we need to assess what our staff looks like all around.
So, AJ, I want to get then to that second idea. Say, okay, Gen Z and or millennial, go do something. Give us an idea. Give us a volunteer activity. Give us a special event fundraiser. Get us an activity that attracts new donors. Go. What are some things, again, that the Gen X and Boomers need to know about on how the answer that comes back might look very different than the central casting that they've been used to for the last 10 or 20 years?
Yeah. So you're saying are you talking about the older generation, or the younger generation needs to be primed? Yeah.
And that's, I'm again suggesting that if the Boomers and Gen X are on the board and they're saying, hey, Gen Z, millennials, come bring us some ideas. As you suggested, Gen Z and millennials are approaching their philanthropy differently. What do those older board members need to be ready for? Understand how Z and millennials are thinking as they're putting those ideas together.
Well, I think that that's also a leadership, Bill. I think that that is a leadership thing. I think that there needs to be a clear conversation of why we're having these people, these younger generations, bring in their ideas and to execute the ideas, and also too to let them understand that it's not for them, that they still have their events and they still have their volunteer opportunities, but you have to prime them and let them know, if this doesn't happen, we will wither on the vine. I think that's something that needs to be in the forefront. Is it has to happen. It's not gee, it would be nice if this happened. It has to happen to stay solvent and to stay relevant, especially.
We know that our younger generations like to do things in groups. So inviting them to say, hey, how'd you like to get a lot of your friends together to come do this volunteer activity, do this special event? They love to take pictures. They love to shoot short little videos, create some scenes and some opportunities. How many of us have been to the wedding and they set up the kind of crazy couch with the fluorescent lights in the back? That's called going to a Gen Z millennial wedding now, because they want that unique photo to put on social. As AJ mentioned, the millennials, they were our digital pioneers. The Gen Z are our digital natives. They've known nothing but. And to give them those opportunities to reach out to their friends, use their pictures, use those videos, all of these different types of ways. And AJ, I'm also struck by the research that says those two younger generations tend to be drawn first to the cause before they are to the nonprofit. And so in your professional fundraiser, you're like, okay, great, feeling that, awesome that you love the cause, but I have this nonprofit over here that needs donations. Right. So again, as you've shared your wisdom and expertise with your clients, what has that looked like to help, first get Gen Z and millennials in the door, but then help them move from that passion for the cause to support for the nonprofit?
And that's a really good point, is that when you talk about them being digital nomads and digital pioneers, is that they're so used to having themselves be the focus. When they have events, it's all about them. When you do an event, you have to be very intentional to bring them in because it's fun and they have those photo opportunities, but have that moment where it pivots and the focus is on the mission. And that's something that's very difficult to do. I see so many times organizations literally, they're almost putting on bar mitzvahs. It's like, we need a photo booth and now we need a magician, and you don't. This is a time where we are building relationships and stewardship. And while you give them the opportunity to bring them in with something fun, we're having a pub crawl, there has to be moments where your mission is so visible and upfront and so engaging that they're saying, I I have to know more about this organization, because there's a lot of other organizations that do the same thing as you do. Why is your organization unique and different? And they want to know that, because they are data driven and impact driven, and they want to know what you're doing. And if they spend their time and energy and money investing it in you, what impact can they see and feel proud they're a part of?
Yeah, AJ, I think you nailed it with a great phrase. We can sum all of this up in the phrase pub crawl. Because the older generation is like, I'm going to get my invitation. I'm going to go to my event. It's at one place. I have one seat. It's all planned for me. And Gen Z millennials like, this is the first of 6 places we're going. There's going to be very loud music. We're going to be standing shoulder to shoulder. You might hear what I'm saying, but probably not. And then we're going to go to the next place and the next place and the next place. It's one of those examples. So yeah, pub crawl. How to fundraise for millennials and Gen Z. So you did that without even trying. That's how good you are. What final advice do you have for nonprofits? Either kind of common problems that you see or common practices that have worked. Any other final advice you have for nonprofits as they, sincerely are interested, and the millennials and Gen Z are sincerely interested in making sure all the generations are included as volunteers, as board members, and as donors.
Right. And I think I think one of the first things we need to do is we need to be open-minded and change our thinking about each generation. I just heard a statistic that for legacy, we're always thinking legacy, let's get the boomers, because for legacy giving, I heard 55 years old is the typical age, is the average age where they plan their legacy giving, which is not what we think. We think you're 70 or 80 and this is who we're talking to. So be very open-minded all around as to where people are in their giving cycle. Remember that you need to speak their language so that the younger generations will understand what you're even trying to say to them. Communicate, meet them where they are. All of these things will bring you to them, but it's up to you to show your mission and your impact, because even though we need a lot of fun and pub crawls to get them in the door, it's what we do once we have them in the door that's so important, and we need to treat them with respect and understand they're pretty incredible. We need them.
Absolutely. And the best way to make a well-informed decision is to be well-informed. And the best way to be well-informed is to gather information and perspective from lots of different sources and lots of different demographics of people. AJ Steinberg is the CEO and principal of Queen Bee Fundraising. You can find Queen Bee Fundraising online. And AJ, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us on the Fundraising School's First Day podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Bill.
And this conversation is part of so many of our courses. I don't know if we have a course that does not address, integrating more generations into our nonprofit organizations. 27 public courses in all. We're in 10 cities in the continental United States. And of course, anywhere in the world, online, both with recorded classes and live virtual courses as well. The courses lead to 5 different certificates. Now, we can also bring training just to your nonprofit, your association, your region through our custom training. We might even take a part of this course and a part of that course and knit it together for you based on your specifications. We have quarterly webinars, this weekly podcast, and our textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, the book now out in its 5th edition. Where do you find all of this? Of course, online at go.iu.edu/TFRS for the Fundraising School. Grateful for our producers today, the Emmy Award winner, Mike Anthony, as well as our colleague, Molly Gross. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.